As you know, it's been touted as an historic election in our country's democracy. The polls will be an important marker for the next 5 years. Will this election move the governance needle as is hoped? But what happens after the elections as the results start to come in? How is the horse trading likely to unfold? Could we face the possibility of a hung parliament? Professor Kebidone Phago is the director of the School of Government Studies at Northwest University and joins me now to look at the future prospects for how power could shape up here in South Africa. Prof, good morning and welcome. Thank you very much for your time. So I want to quickly just start with the polling, right, which variously plots the ANC on course to dip below its majority, around 40 to 42% of the vote, down from their 57.5% in the 2019 elections. It's also predicting strong gains for the opposition with the emergence of new parties. So the field is wide open and the ANC may be forced into coalitions with smaller opposition parties for the first time in its history. So I want to talk to you about, the day after the results are sort of collated, they've now dipped below that majority. It would be, we're hearing possibly these talks about possible partners would have happened way before the elections about who they might want to dance with. But it all would depend on the numbers and then it would influence how they shop around. Would it? Would it not?
Yes, that's good morning, Iman, and thanks for the opportunity. So you are very correct. For me, I think there is quite a lot that we need to understand. Firstly, because as you correctly pointed out, ANC moving from 57% to what we see now as around 40, 41, 42%. It's quite a big surprise. But I think also if we put in, which I'm a bit reluctant, but if we want to make a case and talk about the overall outcome of the local government elections 2021, which brought it to around 53%. So it is a huge downward spiral for the ANC if these recent polls are anything to go by. And I'm not so sure, honestly, that these are proper reflections. I know some of these polls are highly credible, but we still really need to understand. From the local government elections outcome, what we understood by and large was that the majority of urban dwellers had actually sent a very strong message to the ANC. Maybe because South African urban dwellers and rural dwellers have a strong relationship. Many of the people who live in cities work in the cities, but they still have a home or visit rural areas. So maybe that in a way can give us an explanation if we really want to put our heads around this. So I think I just thought, let me give you this thinking of what could be the possible contradictions and explanations of what we are seeing as a downward spiral. But the second part of your point is, so we want to see who the ANC, because even if they go down, they will, I think, still be coming back as a governing party. But I think it is who they would want to govern with that indeed should be occupying us at the moment. And I think they should have by now made few scenarios for themselves to make a determination on who should be part of their inner circle in terms of the coalition government that we are anticipating.
Prof. Phago, thank you very much for that that context setting or that scene setting for us, because as you say, polls could be subjective. You could look, for a statistical base to make this comparison on, and then you would probably look at local government elections, but do they always mimic the way the national vote might go and so on? So there are a number of complexities and intricacies in trying to determine and to plan ahead to where the ANC is likely to land. And so our conversation, I guess the focus of the nation is less on the existential implications for the ANC, but what happens to the country in terms of governance. governance. And as you say, they would still need to think about, if the numbers are to be believed, who they would likely partner with, and certain scenarios emerge, because what we do not want in the country is a hung parliament where either there's a single political party that wins an outright majority or a pre-existing coalition that wins an outright majority. We would be in a state of limbo. So maybe just explain to our viewers what this hung parliament scenario looks like, and then we'll move forward and talk about what's potentially likely to happen.
Yes, I will do that. Let me just take a first, step and make my view. I think what we need to be talking about very realistically as South Africans and the political leaders is they need to be realistic. They need to know that we are in this age of coalition governments, and whoever wants to establish a political party or want to be a player in here should be somebody who is going to come with solutions for South Africans and not further complicate the situations we are facing. I'm saying this, Iman, because we are not the only country that is actually facing this situation. There are many countries that came before us that have been experiencing the situation for coalitions for many years, and they are able to run their governance affairs better. But having said that, I also think that for now, maybe ANC wants to look at the political parties. So I'm thinking here that they may say, if we've got 40%, we need to look into who is maybe hovering around 10-15%, and that is EFF and DA. So I'm not sure if they would want to consider a coalition with either of the two and maybe have a smaller party. But if they get around 48, 49, I think that would make their life a little bit easier, because they can then only they can pick up just a smaller party. For me, a smaller party will make their life easier because the demands will be far less than if they have to go into coalition with the DA or with the EFF, which can actually come and put a lot of pressure on the ANC in terms of the positions, in terms of the expectations that they need to get out of that kind of an arrangement.
Professor Phago, hold on a second.
Yeah. They are in trouble.
All right, so I want you to stay with me for just a second, because I want to pick it up, because it all depends on, as you say, what the numbers reveal, which then determine whose hands they need to join with. But if you will just indulge me for a second, I want to go to our reporter in the field, and I'll come back to our discussion with you. Hopefully time allows. I was talking to Professor Kebidone Phago, who is still with me. And Prof, when you see moments like these that our reporters just shared with us, the importance, this is such an important democratic step, but it's also the what happens next that becomes incredibly important, depending on how these voting numbers stack up. And you were sharing with us some of the preparations that the ANC would have to start, what they would have had to have started thinking about in terms of who they partner with. But it's this very fine line, because it's the numbers that would determine how their engagement could play out after the final numbers are tallied and who they eventually partner with.
Yes, thanks, Iman. And I think for Ntate Piet, this is quite surreal, and for all of us as South Africans, because we know it was not an easy moment for us to arrive into 1994. And going forward, I think many South Africans have really embraced this and look forward to every election period. And it is on this point, I agree that the ANC and some of the political, bigger political parties need to prepare their documents in terms of their the coalition arrangements and what they would like to see. For me, to be in the political space, Iman, it's about dealing with community issues. It's about being a statesman who really embodies the values, the ethics, the aspirations, the governance, culture, structures of the society. So when we fail to live up to those kind of expectations and translate society's problems into opportunities and create a developmental path and address youth unemployment and these socio-economic problems, it means that we need to go back and regroup and find one another. And I think it is during this particular point in time that we are facing a coalition system that maybe we need to then sober up a little bit and say, can we work for South Africa? Can we make sure that whoever goes to the provincial legislature, to the national legislature, really serve the interest of South Africa, over the interest of the individual and above the interest of the political parties, because this is what we've seen in the recent past.
So let's go then to the practicalities of what happens without an outright majority. As you say, there would be some horse trading, there would be some discussions behind the scenes. But how soon would the arrangements need to be made public? So give us a sense of the timeframes and whether we risk being in a situation where we go, 3 months, 6 months or so in a hung parliament situation.
So in my view, Iman, our democracy would not live long, especially our public institutions. They are really embattled. And if we are going to wait for 3 months and 6 months to constitute a government, I think we are going to be in big trouble. We have, been through very difficult moments. And I think we are beginning to see some positive movements in our public institutions. The law enforcement agencies, I think, even if it's in a very slow pace, but I think that they are beginning to consolidate. And I saw the NPA has some positive developments. So we do not want to have an executive that is delaying the consolidation, because that is actually at the helm of decision making. So I would think that politicians need to prioritize this and say, and prioritize the decision on at what point should we then make sure we now have a coalition government, if that is what the election outcomes are going to give it to us. So maybe a 2-3 weeks, I think, should be more than enough. In my view, and I know that many of the political parties have been sort of in the background discussing potential partners, or models and frameworks of their coalition. So I don't think that they are going to be caught by a surprise. So they need to be combat ready and make sure that it's all systems go. It's just a question of what are the important demands from the other sectors, and then put up their heads together. So it is very possible, and I've got a lot of faith in many of our politicians, especially at the national level. So I do not really foresee a situation where we're going to stay for 3, 4, 5 months without a government, because that would really be very serious, will bear serious consequences for our governance structures.
Professor Kebidone Phago, thank you very much for your time and for your analysis, and from your vantage point, the assurance that we're not going to be left in limbo when it comes to the day after the election, so to speak. Professor Kebidone Phago is the Director of the School of Government Studies at Northwest University.